We are live.
Okay, we are live with the Senate Finance and April 16th, and the first item on the agenda is the captive insurance bill 659 has been sent back to us. There's been some change in cryptocurrency, so I'm gonna have Maria kind of walk us through what they did, and then we have a couple of witnesses.
Good afternoon, Maria Royal with Lake Plated Council, and what I prepared for you is a copy of just the section that was amended. It's posted online under my name, and there are some hard copies that have already gone around. I have some extras here if you would like one.
Yep.
Okay. And so what I did to make it a little bit easier is just highlighted what's the difference.
Okay,
And this is the only section that was amended, so if you remember, it's 150 page, 100, maybe even more than that, actually.
so they sent it to us because they couldn't get to it.
Right, right, so the only amendment that passed the House, was with respect to virtual currency kiosks. These are the Bitcoin ATM-like devices that are in convenience stores, whatever. And so the proposed changes to that section, all the changes are highlighted. So first of all, just adding some subsection headings, right, just to be clear. So the daily transaction limit, the fee cap, and then with respect to the fee cap, so on page 1, line 17,
Okay,
DFR had proposed that the fee cap be limited to $5, or originally it was 15% of the US dollar equivalent of virtual currency involved in the transaction. The proposal in the House is to lower it further to 3%.
okay, this was a DFR.
So this is a House amendment to DFR's 15%.
Was it suggested by DFR?
It was suggested by the Commerce Committee, but DFR did testify.
Okay, so we will have DFR tell us. Why they're doing that.
So C, again, just the single definition of single transaction, licensing requirements, operator accountability, again, just headings. So this real substantive, the second substantive change, you'll see at the bottom of page 2. There were a number of concerns discussed in Commerce about potential fraud, scams related to the use of kiosks. And so what they have proposed is a moratorium for 2 years. So on line 19, to protect the public safety and welfare and safeguard the rights of consumers, virtual currency kiosks shall not be permitted to operate in Vermont prior to July 1st, 2026.
For the year.
2 years, and then in addition, related to that, on page 3, subsection G is a report back from DFR. And it specifies that on or before January 15th of 2026, so before the moratorium ends, the commissioner shall report to House Commerce, Senate Finance on whether the requirements of this section, coupled with relevant federal requirements, are sufficient to protect consumers in Vermont from fraudulent activity. If deemed necessary and appropriate, the commissioner may make recommendations for additional statutory or regulatory safeguards. In addition, the commissioner shall make recommendations for enhanced oversight and monitoring of virtual currency kiosks for the purpose of minimizing their use for illicit activities as described in the U.S. Government Accountability Office report from 2021. And that was a big report that it did, highlighting their use because of the anonymity of a kiosk. You're not using a personal device, so there's not a lot of tracking of transactions. And for that reason, there's been a correlation between drug trafficking, human trafficking, etc. And so, in recognition of some of these concerns, their proposal was to have a moratorium and hear back from DFR
Okay,
about any additional measures that might be necessary.
so this basically says we've done all this, but we're not gonna do it for 2 years until we're sure that it's protected.
Correct, so you can add, you'll have a session to make additional requirements, if not, then what you have proposed here is that will be take effect.
Okay, questions, committee, we understand what they've done. Senator?
I understand what they've done. I'm just curious as kiosk is, it's not an architectural thing. It's a place where transactions are.
It's like an ATM. If you think of an ATM, it looks like an ATM, similar to an ATM, you can put in cash and buy virtual currency, Bitcoin or whatever.
Okay,
Sounds like I should have been on time.
Yeah.
It's a little, it's this sort of space age technology like whatever, Bitcoin, the Bristol Vermont Shaw, I can go buy Bitcoin. That's like they're surprisingly available right in the grocery store.
that's so, do you know?
It's in the produce section.
Next to the frozen foods.
Okay, once it's not going to live for a while. Any questions? Senator Gray, did you?
No question.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, we have, I'm looking at this, I have Aaron first, but I have Mark Smalley up there, so, and I have Larry Lipka out there and David Lipka on my agenda, so Larry or Mark, I'm gonna turn it over to you. And I hope somebody's there. Okay, Larry, you got on first, so you're in charge.
All right, thank you. I think just a typo with my name, but it's Larry. So Chair Cummings, Vice Chair McDonald, and honorable members of the Senate Finance Committee, thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony to offer additional consumer protection focused recommendations. My name is Larry Lipka, and I am the General Counsel for CoinFlip. These recommendations can be effective in preventing fraudulent transactions at virtual currency kiosks. And we understand and agree that consumer protection is very important. But without changes, we oppose H659, specifically the moratorium on virtual currency kiosks. CoinFlip believes that a strong regulatory framework is necessary to protect consumers and encourage innovation. First, I'll do a little bit of background about our company. CoinFlip is a Chicago-based global digital currency platform focused on providing customers with a simple and secure way to buy and sell virtual currency. Founded in 2015, we're one of the largest operators in the world with more than 4,900 locations across the US and in 7 countries around the world, employing more than 240 people. CoinFlip kiosks make buying and selling major cryptocurrencies accessible and secure for consumers who wish to purchase their virtual currency using cash. CoinFlip operates 3 virtual currency kiosks in the state of Vermont and holds a money transmitter license granted by the state's Department of Financial Regulation on November 1st, 2021. CoinFlip also registers its kiosk under the Vermont Money Transmitter Kiosk ATM registration. Additionally, CoinFlip is a money service business registered with FinCEN, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. As an MSB, a money service business, CoinFlip is subject to the Bank Secrecy Act, the US Patriot Act, and their implementing rules and regulations. As a company, one of CoinFlip's key business priorities is consumer protection. We know our company will not succeed and our customers will not succeed unless our customers believe we provide them with a safe and secure platform in which to transact with virtual currency. CoinFlip's compliance and consumer protection efforts are currently overseen by a Chief Compliance and Legal Officer, myself, a Bank Secrecy Act Officer, and a Consumer Protection Officer. To effectively manage the risks associated with its operations, CoinFlip implements both traditional consumer protection efforts such as clear disclosures and warnings, as well as state-of-the-art technology to detect and prevent fraudulent transactions. When transacting with a CoinFlip kiosk, customers are warned numerous times regarding scam-related activity prior to initiating every single transaction. Additionally, CoinFlip has 24/7 live customer service and lists its numbers both on the physical kiosks as well on the transaction screens. Customers are instructed to call CoinFlip in the event that a third party sent them to transact at the kiosk. As a result of these efforts, between December 2023 and February 2024 alone, CoinFlip's customer support team halted more than 300 potential scams by speaking with the customer, and that's globally, not just in Vermont. CoinFlip implements state-of-the-art blockchain analytics and compliance tools to block fraudulent transactions and investigate suspicious activity. It is a technology that works. Since April 2022, CoinFlip has automatically blocked more than 1,230 transactions using blockchain analytics. CoinFlip believes smart regulation is good for business. We have developed the following best practices that would further enhance consumer protection. First, require licensure with the state. CoinFlip agrees that the proposed language in H659 and believes a money transmitter license should be required for all digital currency kiosk operators. The license would implement baseline requirements similar to other financial institutions operating in Vermont, allowing for state oversight and periodic audits to determine the adequacy of compliance, finance, and cybersecurity programs. Second, require robust compliance. We believe kiosk operators should be required to directly employ a qualified in-house chief compliance officer and compliance team that does not have a large ownership interest in the company. At CoinFlip, we take compliance seriously. Our chief compliance officer is a former federal prosecutor, and I am a former Illinois assistant attorney general. Next, require clear, highly visible warnings and fee disclosures. We agree with the current proposed legislation regarding the requirement of clear disclosures regarding all fees and terms of service. We also believe highly visible fraud warnings should be required to be displayed and acknowledged by the customer prior to initiating and completing any transaction. Next, requiring blockchain analytics. The use of blockchain analytics technology should be required to prevent fraud by automatically blocking customer transactions to high-risk digital wallets. And for those of you that don't know about blockchain analytics, why would you? This is a software solution that uses AI technology and publicly available data to flag high-risk wallets, those that have been associated with criminal activity. And a company, when a customer tries to send to that wallet, automatically blocks that and rejects the customer so that they cannot transact because that's an indication they might be getting scammed. And lastly, we believe requiring live customer service is important. Customer service is the first line of defense for consumer protection. We believe every virtual currency kiosk operator should be required to provide trained live customer service from a minimum of 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. When they're operating. So unfortunately, H659 relies on policy recommendations that create a false sense of consumer safety. The proposed transaction limits in the bill do not adequately consider federal suspicious activity reporting requirements, which have a $2,000 threshold. This encourages the structuring of transactions to further obscure fraud, creating less transparency in information being reported to federal law enforcement. Further, these policies do not consider Vermonters' lawful use of cryptocurrency and the unintended consequences of arbitrary transaction limits. The addition of transaction fee caps does not prevent customer fraud, and in combination with transaction limits, inadvertently creates incentives for less transparency and less use of expensive compliance tools like blockchain analytics, which keep consumers safe. Additionally, the proposed moratorium would negatively impact Vermonters' lawful ability to purchase and transact with cryptocurrency by eliminating an important access point. For underbanked Vermonters who wish to invest in cryptocurrency, virtual currency kiosks are the only available on-ramp for those consumers who wish to transact using cash. For many consumers, buying virtual currency directly and having direct custody of that virtual currency rather than using an exchange or a third party is important and why we choose to use CoinFlip's platform. We understand the balance the Vermont state legislature is trying to achieve in protecting consumers and enabling lawful transactions of virtual currency, and respectfully recommend that should a moratorium be enacted, that it only apply to new entrants in the state and exempt existing operators that hold valid money transmitter licenses with the Vermont Department of Financial Regulation. Although blockchain technology and virtual currency kiosks are new, the fraud we see reported is all too familiar. Whether it's phone, email, text, or online pop-ups, scammers repackage the same old tactics and utilize whatever methods they can using Venmo, PayPal, Zelle, gift cards, MoneyGram, or Bitcoin ATMs to dupe people out of their money. We share your goal of consumer protection, but the bill does not fully address the range of policies that can help achieve effective consumer protection. The best defense for consumers is to be well-informed and well-alerted at the point of transaction. The best defense for companies is to have the right tools in place to help identify and prevent fraud and help law enforcement catch the bad actors. It's more important than ever that we do not simply treat the symptoms, but attack the root of the financial fraud and arm consumers with the knowledge needed to stay one step ahead of scammers. These kiosks give everyday people access to owning a piece of a booming financial sector without needing a fancy wealth advisor or a banker. And that is a powerful equalizing force that will help ensure that cryptocurrency does not become a walled-off rose garden available only to those fortunate enough to have access. Companies like CoinFlip play an important role in the digital currency ecosystem, and our continued success ensures a diversity of ways for people to invest and participate in this growing sector. In conclusion, should the Senate move forward with the bill as amended by the House, we would ask the committee to include a stakeholder group under the direction of the Vermont Department of Financial Regulation to put together a report on the findings and recommendations. CoinFlip would like a seat at the table to strengthen regulations in a collaborative and thoughtful way. We believe as a virtual currency kiosk operator that has collaborated with groups like the AARP and state police, we can strengthen regulations going forward. Again, we oppose a moratorium and would respectfully request the provision be removed from the bill or establish a moratorium only on new operators until the report and recommendations are presented to the Vermont State and House of Representatives. Thank you, and I would welcome any questions about my testimony or about our industry. Thank you.
Okay, committee, any questions? I'm not seeing any. Okay,
One question
yes,
is how do you do business in Vermont in general?
So we have 3 kiosks in Vermont currently, and they're placed in convenience stores or gas stations. And consumers can go to the kiosk and purchase cryptocurrency with cash. So they walk up to the machine, they read a bunch of disclosures, they have to provide us some information, including their name and their phone number, and depending on the level or the amount of crypto that they're buying, they may have to provide ID, social security number, source of funds, why they're purchasing the cryptocurrency. Mostly people say it's for investment purposes. And then they say the amount they want to buy, they feed the cash in to buy it, and then they scan their digital wallet and we send them the crypto instantaneously. Did that answer your question?
It is. What kind of dollar transactions do you deal with? What sort of range of transactions? And is cash the only mechanism by which they can make purchases?
So at the cryptocurrency kiosk, for my company, yes, cash is the only way they can make a purchase. And that's because this is the only way to purchase cryptocurrency with cash. So for somebody who doesn't have a bank account, they can't go to Coinbase and buy crypto because they don't have a bank account. So we see this as an opportunity for people who may not have a bank account, may not trust the financial services system, or who have a lot of cash, like a waitress or somebody being paid in cash can buy cryptocurrency. And the transactions range from $20 to a few thousand. Most people are buying like 500 to 1,500 at a time, and we have a lot of customers who will come back sort of every other Friday or every payday, and that's when they are, that's when we have the most transactions at our machines.
Could you reach the kind of money in cash that would trigger anti-money laundering examination, either at that level or slightly below the level? 10,000.
Yeah, so we do submit SARs for any suspicious activity that is $2,000 or higher. That is the threshold for submitting a SAR. Anything under lower than 2,000, the federal government does not accept SARs or does not review them. And then at $3,000 is when we're required to collect social security number from customers, which we do. And then $10,000 is when you have to submit a currency transaction report. And that does happen rarely when somebody's buying $10,000 worth of crypto with cash. We submit that CTR so that the federal government can investigate whether that person is involved in money laundering. And then we also have a large compliance team that examines all the transactions and all the customers. And as somebody is buying more crypto, they'll be required to provide more information, like I said earlier, like their source of wealth. We may ask them for their bank account statements to show that they actually have this money, and we ask them why they're purchasing it. What is their job? So if somebody is a retired school teacher and they bought $50,000 worth of crypto over the last 6 months, that will trigger an investigation. Because why is a retired school teacher able to buy so much crypto? And oftentimes it could be that they got an inheritance or something legitimate, but we do look into that because we're required to do that under the Bank Secrecy Act and the U.S. Patriot Act. We have to have a risk-based approach to our compliance program.
And have you had any instances, specifically regarding the kiosks that you have in Vermont, but the kiosks in general, that have involved fraud on the one hand, or confirmed cases of illegal money laundering?
So we have had cases of fraud. Unfortunately, even with all of the protections we have in place, the warnings, some people still get defrauded, like in any financial services product. Scammers are looking to make money. And in those instances, we do have a policy where we refund the victims of fraud their transaction fees, because we do not want to be seen as profiting off of somebody's scam. So it does happen. I can't lie about that. We think that we do a good job of preventing fraud. We think it happens more at small operators who don't have the robust compliance programs and robust compliance employees. And you'll hear from Mark Smalley at Bitcoin Depot. They, I think, are similar to us, where they do everything right. But once in a while, somebody falls through the cracks. And we do get subpoenas from law enforcement, and we can tell from the subpoena that they're investigating, money laundering or criminal activity. We don't know for sure the outcome of those investigations because we're not always involved. But we have received letters from state law enforcement thanking us for assisting them in their investigations by responding to subpoenas in a timely manner.
You mentioned that you refund the transaction fees involved in fraud cases. And those presumably are the fees that you charge a person who's put cash in the machine. But the cash is not, you don't consider that your responsibility to do anything with if it's used illegally in the machine, provided your rules are followed. Is that a fair description?
Yeah, so I would say that, first, the transaction is a legal, valid transaction. We have a customer who comes up to us, sees all the warrants, agrees that they've not been sent there by somebody else. We give them the scam typologies, and they have to certify that they've read it. And then they do a lawful transaction where they say, I want to buy $100 worth of Bitcoin. We say, okay, scan your digital wallet, and this is a digital wallet you own. You're sending it to yourself. They have to agree to that, and then they scan the digital wallet. We send the crypto to the place that was designated. So, our position is, and I think that this follows the law, is that is a valid legal transaction. The illegality is the fraudulent inducement by a third party or a scam actor who convinces somebody to, instead of sending crypto to a wallet they own, sending to a crypto wallet by the scam artist. So, we don't refund the full amount because we've already sent the crypto to the designated wallet, and we can't recover that.
And there's no insurance then of any kind of monies that go through your machine?
No, yeah, there's no way to get insurance to cover that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? I'm not seeing any. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
First time to hear from someone from the industry. Is Mark Smalley there? We're a few minutes ahead. Ethan McClellan? We do not have them done for.
I see Mark.
Is Mark. Okay. Mr. Smalley, welcome to Senate Finance. Just introduce yourself and who you represent for the record, and the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you. Members of the Finance Committee, I'm Mark Smalley, the Chief Compliance Officer at Bitcoin Depot. We are the largest Bitcoin ATM kiosk operator in the world. Thank you for your time and affording me the opportunity to speak about our perspective on House Bill 659. Our company was established in 2016 and has grown to be the largest cryptocurrency network in the United States by investing in people, technology, and processes that support a culture of compliance. The company became a public entity on June 30th, 2023, and trades on the NASDAQ under the ticker symbol BTM. By virtue of being a public company, the company is fully accountable to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Additionally, the company is a registered money services business with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, and its primary regulator is the Internal Revenue Service. Our business model is that we place our kiosk in retail centers such as gas stations and convenience stores, renting that space, many who are small businesses. The company inserts cash into the kiosk and almost instantly purchases Bitcoin and then transfers the Bitcoin to the customer's designated wallet. We do not custody customer funds or have accounts where customers can hold funds. It's purely transactional in nature. We pay store owners monthly rental fees. We pay armored car companies to service the kiosks, and we pay taxes in states like Vermont. Our kiosks are placed in a wide variety of neighborhoods, including higher income areas and not targeting marginalized individuals in lower income areas, as anecdotes may suggest. Our customers include the underbanked and unbanked. Individuals who have used our service have self-designated that their primary purpose of purchasing Bitcoin is sending funds to family members abroad online payments and purchases, remittances and money transfers, and investment of stored value. Our concerns with the Vermont legislation include the following items: the 2-year moratorium, overregulation of the kiosk by requiring multiple licenses, transaction limits, and fee caps. Placing permanent or long-term transaction limits have unintended consequences, including skirting federal reporting requirements, such as the monetary instrument log, funds travel rule, currency transaction reporting, which translates previously routine reporting into obfuscation. They encourage both good and bad actors to spread transactions across multiple kiosk operators. For bad actors, these limits obscure criminal activity from law enforcement by impacting pertinent reporting already mentioned, including SARS. And good actors choosing to use alternate banking methods should not have to suffer additional taxation in the form of kiosk shopping to multiple locations to complete necessary transactions. In terms of fee caps, operating a cryptocurrency kiosk has unique costs, including purchasing, installing, and maintaining the kiosk equipment. There are also recurring costs, including rent to small businesses, hosting a kiosk, insurance, legal fees, bank fees, blockchain access fees, cash management, armored vehicles, monitoring and surveillance, BSA AML OFAC compliance, cybersecurity, fraud detection, and live customer support. Exchanges that custody funds do not have hardware costs that kiosk operators maintain. Other financial service companies that custody funds can assess fees in multiple touch points during the relationship. We cannot. A bad kiosk operator who can charge lower fees, they do not maintain strong compliance or consumer safeguards. The current proposed fee cap of 3% would be the lowest in the country. Vermont must balance its desire to have the most reputable BTM operators in the state with higher costs of compliance and consumer protection. In terms of the licensing, we fully support kind of responsible and effective licensing. Currently, the department has required us to secure multiple licenses in the NMLS system, including a standard money transmitter license for our company, and then a separate license for our DBA name. And now licenses, they are requiring us to secure licenses for each individual kiosk. Vermont is an outlier in this requirement, whereas states that require a money transmission license only require us to have one, entry in NMLS, and jurisdictions that require individual kiosk business license require this outside of the NMLS system. The proposal to have us secure licenses for every kiosk in NMLS is overburdensome, and especially when considering the proposed fee caps and transaction limits. And finally, we would just like to say that the moratorium is a punishment to licensed businesses that fully comply with laws and should be enforced against those operators who have yet to secure licensure. That's my initial feedback on the proposal. I'm here to answer any questions or any feedback.
Mark, and I will ask this of Larry too. Did you have the opportunity to testify before the House committee?
No,
No.
I
have not either.
Okay.
Yeah. Our legislation tracker picked it up as it was passed. There was no outreach to industry, and I don't think it was proposed formally until it actually was passed. Otherwise, we would have tried to, discuss and engage.
Okay. Committee, any questions? Senator Chip.
I believe somebody said that there are currently 3 of these kiosks, so if this moratorium would go into effect, those 3 would have to cease operating, is that correct?
So that was me. CoinFlip has 3 kiosks right now, so that is correct. If the moratorium went into effect, we would have to discontinue operating the machines and stop paying rent to the host, the store where we have the kiosk placed. And Mark can say how many their company has.
So we have 14 locations. We also offer a similar product to the kiosk, which is our BD checkout product, which is handled through our mobile app and allows a customer to go to a designated retail center where we have a partnership And they could have the cashier scan the QR code and complete a transaction up to $1,000. It would be unclear whether the BD checkout product would be affected by the moratorium, but similar to CoinFlip, we would, if there's a moratorium, we would have to, I believe we have 5 physical kiosks in the state.
Okay. Any other questions? If not, is Aaron, if he's here, okay, come on up, I'm used to watching the screen. I'm sorry, I think actually it's probably better that I get mixed up, and we did hear from the companies before we hear from you, and I guess there's a moratorium until you can decide if our system is have enough protection for consumers. So what is the thing? Are we protected or?
Sure, thank you, Madam Chairman, Aaron Ferris, Deputy Commissioner for the Bank Division at DFR, appreciate the policy today. As was testified by Maria, that the moratorium was not our proposal, it was proposed in the House. We do support robust consumer protections and the way that the amendment was structured. I do think the moratorium would give us time to create or develop new additional protections that I think are very important to protection of consumers in the state.
So we should.
You have concern with currently operating kiosks and other activity, or could the moratorium be better suited as a moratorium on new kiosks entering the state?
How do I answer that? There may be things that we're dealing with offline that we can't talk about, just through our normal standard, but I think we've seen examples of people being victimized through financial scams, not by the companies, but through the service that they offer.
Okay. I'm still struggling to understand Bitcoin, so what kind of scams? Say you put money in, you buy Bitcoins, they're put in your wallet, which is like your savings account, and then that money can be invested or used to pay bills online. What do I get for putting
It's
$1,000?
not really like a savings account.
Okay.
That would be, at a bank or
Yeah,
credit insured
sure,
or protected in a lot of other ways. This would be Bitcoin or another cryptocurrency on the blockchain that is available to transfer to another wallet that is also on that blockchain.
So that wallet could belong to the store I buy things from. It could belong to a scammer who is selling me a fraudulent investment. Or,
It just could be them saying, hey, this is my, there are variations on the scam. There are, romance scams, so I could be sending it to my long lost love somewhere. I really have no idea who is on the receiving end of the transaction if I'm sending it to a wallet.
okay, I'm ready to send it, Ray, and send it to you.
I understand this, like, rudimentary understanding of Bitcoin and stuff like that, is there's, some level of, anonymity in things and privacy. Does that mean in a case like of a fraudulent transaction, that it's less, that VFR is less able to investigate and sort of get to the bottom of the scam because you run into basically sort of a privacy wall sooner than if you were working a transaction that had been done through banking, for instance?
Absolutely. I mean, DFR does not have the capability to investigate every fraudulent transaction conducted via these machines or any licensed money transfer for that matter. Like, we have the power to go to the company and investigate, but we wouldn't have the power to necessarily claw back funds that are on the blockchain somewhere. So one of the testifiers mentioned blockchain analytics, and there are firms out there that will They have developed systems that identify and track transactions of blockchain. One thing to keep in mind is that every transaction that's ever occurred on the blockchain is there for everyone to see. So if you identify a wallet on the blockchain that has been previously involved in criminal activity, you can assume any future cryptocurrencies transferred to that wallet may also be involved in the same level of illegal or fraudulent activities. So therefore, that's what the analysts are looking at.
And the analytics, do they provide sort of full identity of who that individual is? Can it be an LLC, or is you can see a person underneath it?
It's sort of pseudo anonymity. It's the Bitcoin wallet identification hash itself. It's just the numbers and letters.
It's on the blockchain,
It's on the blockchain.
owner or scammer could be in Antarctica.
My 15-year-old son or someone halfway around the world that just aren't, you don't know for sure.
Okay,
Chair, may I respond to a couple of things? I think I can add. I interrupt.
let me finish with the questions and then I'll give you a rebuttal. Senator Chittenden, and then Senator McCormick.
I'm good.
You're good? Okay, Senator McCormick.
That's not like a curmudgeon question, but where is the value in the Bitcoin? If you're going back, say, 150 years, there was value in gold, there was value in silver. And you had a piece of paper that specifically cited gold in Fort Knox, and this is a symbol of, okay, so it's a medium of exchange because it has value. Now, we now have the value of my dollar bill is the full faith and credit of the United States government or the credit of the Federal Reserve, who are well-established institutions for which people still have at least some respect. And I can predict that if the dollar is, or unless we have, a crash or something, the dollar, where does the reliability of the value of Bitcoin come from?
I don't know that I'm equipped to answer that question. It's probably pure speculation and sort of the assumption that this is an asset I'd like to own because I think it's going to increase in value. People could be buying it to transfer funds to someone they know. I mean, there are legitimate uses for the transfer of funds via the blockchain. I don't want that picture.
It's very difficult. Well, that's it. It's on blockchain because I have family in Canada.
Sure.
You can't carry cash over the border. It's very difficult to just get money, but if I blockchained it, but I get it out. All right, so he gets the blockchain in Canada. How does he spend that on his kids' college tuition or something? How does it transfer back out of Bitcoin?
So there are presumably businesses that accept Bitcoin as payment for their services, so that person could then transfer their Bitcoin in their wallet to the wallet of the service provider.
Okay,
There
but
are-
that's limited too, right? I mean, maybe if I know going in that where I want to send it, what I want to buy, but it's not easily, you can't say, here's my Bitcoin wallet, I want to turn it in to dollar bills or loonies or whatever.
So, in Vermont, there are licensed exchanges through our money transmission license, which is, the rest of the bills, and we've sort of updated on that.
Yeah.
So there are, I would call them on ramps and off ramps, so that people will take money from your bank account and then use it to buy Bitcoin for you, or vice versa, sell the Bitcoin and transmit that money to your bank account.
Okay. Committee, questions? Going to have to reach a decision. Now, Senator Chairman,
So I have the impression, and maybe this has changed, and if they want to testify, that this is attractive to those that are trying to avoid any traceable or or any traces of transferring monies, often when they're trying to engage in illegal activity, being selling drugs or in the human trade of labor. Is that still the major concern, as if you're trying to avoid transfer funds electronically without having any paper trail? This is an attractive way to do so. Is that correct?
I would think it would be a very attractive way to do so.
So
It's
even
not
at
the only-
$1,000 a day, I could fill up somebody's wallet. Or if there were three people trying to, you were in human trafficking, you were in some illegal activity. Even if we limit you to $1,000 a day, you could transfer a fair amount of money to an illegal or to a wallet. Overseas or even some cross town, but it would pay for an illegal activity and there would be no paper trail of that money going there.
So that's the value. That's why.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, Mr. Luca, did you have a comment you would like to make?
Just a couple of comments. So, actually, blockchain technology means that all transactions are traceable. So there are threat actors out there who were telling people to stop sending them Bitcoin because the FBI can trace it. And specifically, that was Hamas who said it, because you can trace every transaction on the blockchain. And the way you get identifying information is at the on and off ramp. So somebody goes to our machine, they're in front of a physical kiosk in a store. There's a picture taken of them. They have to provide their name and cell phone number at a minimum. A cell phone number is a digital fingerprint where you can identify someone just based on that. And then they have to provide ID and other identifying information, the larger amount of cryptocurrency that they buy. So that is a misnomer that people say that it's untraceable. There is a lot of paperwork that happens. So this is not an attractive vehicle for criminals, because you have to actually have someone physically present in front of a kiosk who has their photograph taken and provides identifying information. That's just not the way that criminals, behave. And there were some questions, and this also gets into the SAR issue, right? If the transaction is limited to $1,000, then no suspicious activity report will ever be generated and sent to the federal government, and no law enforcement can actually investigate what's happening to, one, investigate criminals, two, to prevent future scams, to get restitution for people. So you're actually hurting the efforts to prevent criminal and fraudulent activity with a $1,000 daily transaction limit. And there were, something else, about it being anonymous. It's not, because you need a physical on or off ramp to get cash for your Bitcoin. And that's what people use our machines for. There were some questions about, where is the value in Bitcoin? The value in Bitcoin is, I think of it as digital gold, right? Gold has a value because somebody will buy it from you for that price. That's the same as Bitcoin. And you can use Bitcoin at various stores. I know in Chicago, my local coffee shop, you can buy Bitcoin. You can buy coffee with Bitcoin. Or if you don't have a store where they'll accept Bitcoin, you can go to one of our machines and cash out and get $100 of your Bitcoin sold, so you can go buy dinner that night. And for the federal government, there is an online reporting system called the IC3 report, where if someone has been scammed, they can report that to law enforcement, and the federal government can do the blockchain analytics to see where the crypto went. And I know, having participated in investigations with law enforcement, that those funds can in fact be recovered for scam victims, because there are sometimes friends or family members who are victimizing somebody they know, and the cryptocurrency goes to a wallet they own that's on Coinbase, and there's identifying information associated with that. So it's not anonymous. It's not, a particularly good vehicle for criminal activity, because every transaction can be traced, so where the cryptocurrency ends up. And I think that was all of the questions or comments that I had on that. And I think the most important thing is, KYC is taken. We know our customers. We know who we're transacting with, and we submit SARs when there's suspicious activity, so that police can investigate and prevent any future criminal activity.
Okay. Any further questions? We have captive insurance bill has come back. It was actually the DFR bill that we attached to it, and has essentially, other than some headline putting on, has put a 2-year moratorium. We now have, it sounds like 6, 8 kiosks in the state, maybe more. This is, it's, you know, those of us that are used to the gold standard and the silver standard, remember almost wars fought over them. This is different and it is new. DFR sent us some regulations. I think you said a 2-year moratorium would give you more time to work on that. But if there's no transactions going on, are you limited in your experience as to what happens?
I think it would give us time to work with industry and ask, industry participants what's working in other states. We would be able to confer with, other states that are regulating in this space, what they're doing. It would give us time to hear more from law enforcement folks about what they're seeing, they're the ones dealing with the victims of scams on a day in and day out basis.
Okay. What about the kiosks that are already here? Are we gonna shut those down?
As proposed, that would, there are 37 active registered kiosks in the state of Vermont right now.
37.
That's correct. There's another 7 that are pending our review through the MLS system. Roughly
Do
40.
we have any legal, if they've been licensed, do we have any legal issues with shutting them down?
You'd have to speak with Maria on any sort of legal issue to shut them down.
Yeah, are you ready to?
I don't think so. I did a little bit of research. Maria Roy will let the council. Given the data that was discussed in Commerce, some of the concerns that were raised around consumer protection, illicit activities. I think that's enough of a basis for the state to exercise its police powers. Have a temporary moratorium, get a report back, get information. It's not a permanent prohibition. There's not a substantial impact on interstate commerce such that would trigger that constitutional protection, so it's really a policy
Still go to New
choice.
Hampshire and buy your Bitcoin.
There are other mechanisms. I realize this is a specific one that involves cash that you can't do online. I understand that, but I think it's a policy choice. I think you're within your legal authority if you choose to do this.
There was one point, one of the people online made about the moratorium. This would not, the moratorium as we interpret the language would not stop them from using the agent model where they have the person who is there that would facilitate the transaction, just the kiosk itself.
Okay,
Have other states done a moratorium? Are we out of step with the other 49 states?
I'm not aware of other states doing a moratorium. Where this is a Google search, I think in the United Kingdom, I'm not sure if they're operating in the United Kingdom, but mostly because of licensing, they haven't been a license. So there's some, there are regulatory efforts underway, and in part, that's why that GAO report was referenced, because that highlighted some of the concerns at the federal level, taking more time and understanding a little bit more about what's happening. But not a federal moratorium. I'm not aware of other states that imposing a moratorium.
and I know there was some, wasn't quite sure how to classify these things as banking or securities. Since you're from banking, I assume we've decided to treat them as banking.
Well,
Or,
it's my favorite answer. It depends. There could be
Yeah.
cryptocurrencies that also trigger securities law violations as well.
so, yeah, you don't know if the investment you're buying online has any legal viability. Yeah. Senator McCormick.
More or less revisiting what I just said. I just want to make sure I understand this. The full faith and credit of the United States government impresses people. They still trust it. Okay, there's still an assumption that my money will have close to its value, again, barring the collapse. The full faith and credit of the government of Venezuela, for example, does not enjoy that confidence, and the money is like working. Whose full faith and credit backs Bitcoin?
Nobody's.
So the value of Bitcoin is the expectation that future customers will attribute value to it.
Or I believe that Bitcoin is currently worth, $68,000 per coin, so we can trade on that assumption.
They're actually building a new online currency.
Yeah,
I mean, this is an alternative currency, but there is no,
well, if Bill Gates back then I might trust it, but I don't know.
well, we have already had one major crash.
Yeah,
I've got Senator Gray and then Senator Block.
On the value like $68,000, if I'm holding Bitcoins over a period of time, that value can fluctuate, correct?
Absolutely, every
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, and so it seems a little, the banking analogy a little odd. I mean, it also feels like going out and, stock purchase or something like that, speculation of a sort. The other, thing I just wondered, are there, from your point of view, work about enabling and protecting Vermont consumers? Is there, if their moratorium were to be enacted, is there any legitimate function of that you worry, like, oh, Vermonters will no longer have access to this while we sort of catch up to the industry and look at rulemaking or however you do further regulation?
Yeah, that is something we had considered. We have not heard from anyone that indicates that they're underbanked enough that this is their primary means of entering the financial system. We do know that there are many other ways for someone to enter the market, even with the moratorium, if they so choose.
Maybe go through their agent based online.
That's correct. There are plenty of app-based services that are in your smartphone universe that would allow you to do that. Venmo, for instance, allows you to purchase cryptocurrency. So there are other means to access the market.
May I respond quickly?
I'm gonna finish with
One
committee.
follow. So I'm just gonna have a sense of, we're talking about 37, maybe 44 machines around the state. Do you have any head count on, banks and ATMs in the state? I'm just trying to have a sense of ease of availability.
I could certainly get that information for you. All ATMs, traditional ATMs are required to be registered with us. We do have that information. I'm sure you can.
My bank has at least 4.
Can I follow up on that? Did we talk about how?
I had Senator Brock next.
Oh, okay. It's just a data question. Did we talk about how many transactions are happening at Bitcoin ATMs annually or per month?
You know what? I took a look at the data for 2023 that was reported to us. And so in total, the 4 entities that we're talking about reported a little under $2 million in activity.
Right.
Some of that could have been through other means than their ATMs, though, like the agent model that was discussed earlier. So it's
Not
less than
huge
2 million in 2023.
Senator Brock.
I guess, part of this is just the questions on the use of Bitcoin generally and the impact that it has. If we enact what's being said here, it isn't going to presumably affect how much Bitcoin is transacted in Vermont or anything else regarding Bitcoin, just transaction from these particular kiosks. Is that a fair statement?
That is a fair statement, yes.
Do we know, have you had from Bitcoin used in this way any incidents of criminality that you're aware of?
I am aware of people being victimized with scams.
By scams?
Through these kiosks, that's correct. I'm not aware of any ongoing money laundering.
Any similar scams in non-kiosk Bitcoin transactions though that you see?
We've definitely heard of other scams and other vectors, so.
Definitely
it
have
used to be
romance
people-
scams, dating scams out there.
Right, directed to buy gift cards at the grocery store, other means of.
Yeah, same kind of
The
scam.
factor is really how does
Yeah.
the criminal get the money from the victim?
I want to Bronco in the clearinghouse, and they wanted to keep me on the phone, and they would walk with me all the way to buy Walgreens to buy a $200
Yeah.
gift card to just cover the shipping cost, but the Bronco would be there this afternoon. I told them I was a senator and I knew this was a scam. We'd never got off. I just thought I'd see how far we'd go with
Did
it.
you upgrade into the top Bronco, the one with the extra chrome?
I didn't think of that.
Well, the issue about Bitcoin, I know when it's argued back and forth, is very much reminds me of the Dutch tulip scandal in the early 1600s, in which consumers invested in tulips, and there was a tulip mania in which at one point a single bulb was the value of a house because of the belief that the bulb would increase in value, and there was significant trading until the tulip market crashed. And I always wonder for the same reason about the Bitcoin market as to whether or not it's a real market.
Yeah.
For the long term, but
That's what we don't know.
it's a judgment call.
There is no gold.
And I've heard argument one way or the other, but there's no value behind them. Other than the belief that they will hold value and increase in value or
Sure.
be a currency of some kind.
Sorry to interrupt. This legislation would not stop the tulip bulb behavior.
I think the gentlemen who work for the companies who do these Bitcoins feel that they can track transactions and that they take your picture, so they feel they have adequate security in place. DFR is a little less confident that they've got their head really around what all of this is. We have a proposal from the House to put a 2-year moratorium on. We can concur. We can concur with further proposal of amendment, which might be we do a 1-year moratorium or we strike out the moratorium altogether. Or we cannot concur and ask for a committee of conference in which we can hash it out. Those are our options. Where are we?
We could propose further amendment to exempt existing ATMs from
We could do that.
this moratorium. Like, we've looked at moratoriums on new things coming online, and I just feel more comfortable with that if we don't have much time, because that's still $2 million of transactions that is somebody's currency that it belongs to them. So I do the moratorium looking ahead and keep it at 2 years.
And I guess this is a question really for DFR, based on what you know about this business and this particular product and the risks that you face and what you would do in terms of additional due diligence during the moratorium, are you comfortable with, is DFR comfortable with continuing with what we have right now? Or do you believe that having a moratorium for some period of time so that you can figure out how to better secure or manage is necessary? And this really, I think, is to me, is much more a question for the regulator to answer than it is for us to make an arbitrary decision based on guesswork.
Sure. I think we could accept the moratorium as written. I think we could accept the idea that you were just referring to, Senator, where we allow the existing licensed entities to keep operating based on the other protections that we've put in this bill, while also then developing for the regulatory regime, however that deems to be going, consumer disclosure, other requirements that may come up.
And does that require 2 years?
That's a great question. I don't
I'm asking you work.
Don't know till you start.
Yeah, sort of.
We could do a year and say next year we're gonna look at it again.
Yeah.
Sorry, it's your question to answer, but
Okay.
we could always give you as much time as you need if you don't know after a year.
I'm much more comfortable with the moratorium on new installations, and I think a year or 2 year, I could go either way. A quick Google scan, I can't find any other state that has enacted a moratorium, just as more safety protection. So I think we'd be like the first state to do it. And since the House didn't take as much testimony and then worrying about individual leases these companies might have. I like the idea of a moratorium for new installations, but allowing existing operators to continue is what I would be.
Creating a virtual.
That's cool.
Well,
I mean, it's, I don't see new ones cropping up really soon, and that might also be the reason to do a year instead of 2 years. But it's not a reason to ban the ones that are operating that have not had incident reported to you, as I understand it. That would be kind of preemptively punishing them.
giving us, okay.
You want the moratorium?
I mean, I'm not gonna defend cryptocurrency, but I'm gonna defend people's right to their cryptocurrency because it's their capital. I mean, we don't know what we're doing by taking away someone's ATM access if they have to travel to or talk to an agent. I don't know what that does, so I'm not ready to end their access to their money right now in a half an hour.
Just out of curiosity, by the way, do you have any idea of how much cryptocurrency is manufactured in Vermont currently?
Manufacturers, do you manufacture? Is it like minting? I don't really.
It's mining.
Mining is the correct term. And you can usually tell by the amount of energy consumption.
Right.
The companies need to report all of their activity to us, so I can certainly find out how much virtual currency activity they do report. Did report us.
Are those though only the companies that do some business in Vermont?
Yes.
And if so, but if you manufacture cryptocurrency, you do have to report, do you have a reporting requirement if you manufacture, if you don't distribute or sell it here?
That gets the complicated question. There are, the law would require you to have a license with DFR if you are going to be buying and selling a virtual currency for the purpose of money transmission. So,
But I could just make it, store it on my computer. Can somebody just
Send it to New Hampshire.
send it to New Hampshire? I have no idea how you mine it, except it takes a lot of electricity to do it.
sure.
Probably do, instead of the Global Warming Solutions Act, just prohibit the mining of cryptocurrency and have the same result.
In Vermont,
Mhm.
if we do it,
It was Texas with all the grid issues that was putting in a huge crypto plant. Didn't seem wise, but
Yeah.
okay. I have we have the present, which is a 2-year moratorium on everyone. We have a suggestion that sounds like it's got some agreement, a moratorium on new entrants into the market. And it's been suggested that we do 1 year, we'll put a sunset on it, so we have to look at it. And if DFR doesn't feel they're ready to go in a year, we can extend it to 1 more year. It's, yes, no, you concur
Concur with the moratorium.
with the moratorium.
And
I
until
think that-
businesses that are here,
Yeah.
just not disinclined to do that, frankly. We haven't really gotten an articulation of a problem of significance.
Shut them down, yeah.
No,
Yes, clearly.
I'm sympathetic to what Keisha said and Randy. You know, it's their money. But we operate in this country on kind of an assumption that somebody knows what's going on and that I can trust the monetary system. I mean, every time I put money in the bank, I've got a mutual fund, I presume if I want to sell that, those companies are worth something. And that if they're not, someone's gonna prosecute the scam.
They are until the market crashes.
Yeah, well,
The
that's.
market crashes, you lose
That's the
everything.
biggest.
But there's real value that then declines. I'm not sure there's any value in the Bitcoin beyond, hey,
Value
older is.
is something humans proclaim on something. Gold is valuable because the way it looks and it's rather scarce. Diamonds are created scarcity, but they go the same way. Gold and silver, how we decided they were precious metals, but we assigned the value to them. We could have chosen uranium, which might have been a better deal in this day and age. But we chose it. Somebody out there is choosing to say these things have value. I don't know what it is, but I don't think we're gonna turn the clock back either. Senator Gray.
Yeah, I understand, Senator McCormick's point, but seems like in this case, we're not being asked to validate the notion that there's value in Bitcoin. It's the security of making transactions through these devices and then so I get the bigger picture. It feels like we're being asked to evaluate a smaller task, like can you use these machines or not?
And most people have put some cash value of their own against their purchase of Bitcoin. So I think the question in my mind is, are you going to take away their access to their own, the value of their own currency that they have purchased using other currencies we recognize or with value in other currencies that we recognize? Because you're squeamish about, I mean, I'm not trying to belittle the concern, but it is, I think, a big decision to make that we'd be taking people's access away to their money in the form that they have chosen in a free market country.
Right.
Yeah, but people invest money all the time. There was a time when cabbage patch dolls really thought it was valuable, and they were for a while, and then there were Beanie Babies you could sell. And they go for a while and then people lose interest. This one may have more staying power, but things have value because we assign value to them. We say, this is rare, therefore it's valuable. If it lasts more than 5 years, it's iffy, but that's investment. It's a risk. If anyone would like to buy an American stick bear, I can find you one in my attic.
Chair,
Yes,
if we could establish a conference committee, I want to chair it, provided that I get Abbott and Costello to be my custody.
I don't think they're members of this committee. Committee, we need to make a decision. I thought we were gonna get a break before the next set comes in with a telecommunications modernization. Do we want to do a 2-year moratorium on everything? Anybody who wants to do that?
How about the house?
Okay, I got one for 2 years, a 1-year moratorium.
That plus,
Well, 1 year, do we want to do a moratorium at all, I guess?
A total one that would stop current operators,
Just-
I don't.
Do we want to, we don't want, we have one person who wants to do 2. Does anybody want to do no moratorium, just let it go the way it is and see what happens? Okay, well, we have no 2 and no 0, which leaves us with 1. Can I assume we're assuming 1? Now, I'm starting to feel like an auction.
Or whether it's new or whether it's all.
That's the.
Yes, so the next question is, do we accept the present kiosks that are here? The McDonald method, thumbs up, thumbs down.
I don't know which one.
This is accepting, so there's your.
Oh,
folks
okay.
here. So your folks that do that. Okay, I got 1 down, I got 1 iffy, and I think we've gotten 5 up there.
Yeah.
No, that's not allowed. It's double vote.
This is virtual, it's not being like.
All right. I think we're looking at a 1-year moratorium with an exemption for the existing kiosks. No new kiosks, the existing ones can stand and do money. Is that what we're gonna do? Okay. Do I need to vote this?
Well, I'll come back.
You'll come
with some
back with the language and we will vote it. How long will it?
But it's not, am I right that it's not in this committee, it's on floor still?
It's on
waiting
the
for
floor,
action?
waiting for
And
action
you
from
can do
this
a
committee.
floor amendment, the members, you can sign on or you
But
can
what we
take
use-
possession.
But we, no, it
Okay.
usually sits there, I guess I can ask for possession, it usually.
You can
I
have
thought-
possession or you can do a floor amendment,
Okay.
okay, members
But
individually
usually
sign.
they will concur, we won't concur, but I have to ask for permission to do that.
I think so.
Okay,
I think so, but you might be able to do it as an individual floor amendment, so whatever, I'll do
Okay.
whatever.
If you
Bloomberg-
draft it, we'll vote it, and I will ask for what bill gets sent to us, okay? And we will amend it. I will check with Secretary of the Senate, maybe we're doing that, the rest. Okay. I'm not, what? We're done. Are we done? We will have drafted language, and we'll make a final decision then if we actually do get I think we get to take it in, so.
Can I, be very brief?
Yes.
Like anyone who wants to support that proposal, why are we keeping the 44 or the 37 plus 7 going? Wow, and saying no to anyone else? It's, part of me just says, but if we're happy enough to let 44 keep operating while the discussion's underway, while BFR is working, why are we discouraging anyone else from showing up?
I see a few reasons. I mean, these have operated without incident that anyone could know. They haven't been improper actors in the market. And two, people may have made decisions about which cryptocurrency to go with based on proximity to an ATM. We'd be taking something away from them that they have access to. I think that's really different than allowing new players into the market. We have this conversation about moratoriums all the time.
We did this with
Six people who've been in the market, and they thank us for that.
Well, yeah, it's kind of,
We don't know, it's
Yeah.
judgment.
It's brand new, there's no history, it could all crash and burn tomorrow, or it could become the best thing since sliced bread. We may all.
Generally agree with what Senator Ron Hinsdale just said, and my surface scan of the Google out there is many other states have very rigorous regulations. So my concern is if we don't have some of those safeguards, that this grows like wildfire and attracts more to exploit, to stand up these kiosks in the absence of the regulations other states
we
are
will have
setting
a
up.
better market for you.
With its caps our risk in a way.
And you've got teenagers who have jobs, who have money, who might just think this is cool.
I have friends who are adult millennials who have cryptocurrency. I mean, it is part of their portfolio, part of the mix of their finances. And we would be taking their liquidity away based on 30 minutes of testimony,
Well,
which,
they could still access it.
well, liquidity meaning full access.
Okay, I think we made that decision. I think that's all right with DFR. We'll get it done, and we are going on to the next topic, which is, okay, Del Popper is with us. This is 657. This is that massive, I think the one section is the first section that doesn't have any controversy so far, which is the, rather than going at the 2-3% charge of your voice. Which is this file yours? Yeah, okay.
That's my
recognized it. The 2.3% on your phone bill for your voice, because I've seen a lot of people doing data on their phone in here, but I haven't heard anyone talking on it. Most of what you're doing on your phone is data, and it's, we're losing money, and the goal there is to get, especially E911 back in the black, here in the red. Then there is, I believe, the second section that converts what some towns, not most, tax as business personal property. It will be turning it into real property. DFR has asked us to limit that to, I think, poles, wires, and towers, which may make it easier for, but we don't know what towns will lose. We do have a lister coming in. So that, and then there is the third section, which requires that there is mapping and inventory of the poles in the public right of way, and that the fee is from that. Right now, there is a public good exemption if they determine that there's more public good coming from this poles and wires than the fee, the Department of Transportation.
So
It's in the law. then they can exempt it. This would take away any exemption and say shall collect. I believe transportation has testified they have done a lot of this mapping. And that, but it is fairly strenuous. Not everybody knows where all the poles are. So, we're gonna start with Auditor Hopper, who has written a paper, I think on the present situation, but Mr. Auditor, I'll leave that to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and your staffer told me you guys were going to get to me early. You made it by a minute, so that's a victory of sorts.
I thought we were about a half hour ahead, but then we had to make a decision.
I learned about Bitcoin. Come on, it's all good. Thank you for taking up this issue. I know it came from the other chamber, but we did a job on one aspect of this issue a while back because we became aware that the statutory requirement for AOT to collect a fee for broadband use effectively of the public right of way, and they weren't doing it. And when asked about that, they said, well, the Department of Public Service told us that they had determined that there was a public good from those using the public right of way in this manner. So we don't think it's appropriate to charge. And so we asked Public Service, where is the evidence of your analysis of the public good? And they didn't have one. So I couldn't be more pleased that you are taking this up. I think it's appropriate and overdue. I will say, I'm not aware, because I didn't follow this back in January and February, but I'm not aware of the analysis that led to the three figures that have been proposed in different counties based on population, the 2 cents, 7 cent, 13 cent. I don't know where that came from. I can imagine and hope that it reflects an effort to achieve some equity between rural and urban areas. On the other hand, and this is a two-sided coin, it goes both ways. On the other hand, even though, for example, my county, Chittenden, will effectively be subsidizing everybody else, the numbers appear to be very modest, almost de minimis for this particular fee as an add-on to your broadband bill. So I'm not sure it makes that much difference, but I am curious about how they arrived at these figures, 2, 7, and 13. I was also curious, and this is a policy choice for you guys, but the bill would have CUDs and Comcast exempt from this fee. And I'm not quite sure about why. I did see a document submitted by VCUDA, the entity which represents the CUDs, that includes some estimates of costs, because the otherwise excellent fiscal note that came from JFO on this matter did not address the question of what the impact of these various changes in taxes and fees would mean for consumers, which I think is really important because the legislature has repeatedly expressed its desire that not only do they want to make broadband available to everyone, but it needs to be affordable, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to do. We all know, unfortunately, that thanks to the 96 Telecom Act, the state has no authority to mandate or regulate broadband rates as we do electric, which is really too bad. Having said that, there's a way around that, but it's probably too late in the game. Had the state chosen, instead of creating the CUDs, to spend those hundreds of millions that have already gone out the door for fiber on behalf of the state, and if the state owned that fiber, they could then lease it and control the terms. But that ship has sailed. You may want to revisit that down the road, but today, I guess, is not the day. In any case, VCUDA suggested the costs related to these fees would be in the neighborhood of $3 to $4 a month, or a year, I should say, compared to $11 or $12 for subscribers in Chittenden County. I'm not quite sure how that would lead anyone to think that it's a barrier to the success of the CUDs. It's totally de minimis. And if that's true, and I don't know that, I don't have the source of the data used by VCUDA to arrive at these figures, so I can't say with any certainty, but if that's true, why would they be exempt? The intent language of this bill refers to the desire to be competitively neutral. And this clearly is not neutral. Somebody thought, your colleagues or others thought that it would be better in the broadest sense for the public good, to use the term that you used, Madam Chair, for CUDs to be exempt from this fee, although it doesn't appear to be much of a burden, if I understand their math, for individual customers. Furthermore, the bill exempts Comcast from this fee. That really struck me as odd.
Where does it exempt Comcast?
Comcast in the last year, 2023, is reported to have had $15 billion in net revenue. Not sure why we would exempt them from anything, particularly since they are one of the entities that is responsible for the failure to provide universal access around the state. That's a business decision on their part, which is crazy. That's the truth. As for
Okay, Senator.
Auditor Hopper, I'm under the impression from previous discussions that maybe the argument for cable television providers to be exempted is that their 5% franchise fee that they currently pay to the Vermont Action Network was partly justified because of their use of the right of ways. Does that resonate with you as an argument for why this was considered, or if they were excluded from the relevance of this?
I'm aware of, I assume you're referring to what some would refer to as the PEG fee.
Yes.
Public access, which is important and which has been a subject of controversy for decades now. Is that a public good? You bet. Are we all paying for that? Yes. Can it be said that it's in place of? I'm not sure, because I think that fee is going to be adjusted based on some of the added fees and taxes you have in this bill. If I'm not mistaken, a couple of things do apply to Comcast, and they will be subtracted from the 5%, I think. Somebody can correct me if I'm mistaken.
Well, we're gonna work through this bill and figure it out. It's a complex bill.
Oh,
I don't know, Mike.
no, they were. Perhaps the auditor could tell us who's gonna do the adjusting that he is predicting.
Do you know,
I think the Public Utility Commission.
PUC? Okay.
So in any case, the Comcast issue aside, you guys can deal with that. It struck me when I first read it. The other thought about the CUDs providing a public benefit, and they clearly will and are, that doesn't mean they should be exempt from their otherwise legitimate obligations. For example, I remember learning 35 years ago in Burlington when I first came to town, and the then Burlington Land Trust and others like them were creating what has become a phenomenal positive outcome for the state, which is perpetually affordable housing, including whatever has been contributed by the VHCB and all of us through property transfer tax and so forth. It's a great success story. But I was pleased to learn that all of those properties pay property tax. Just because that model, that housing model, provides an enormous benefit to the state, doesn't mean that they're not obligated to meet their tax.
Okay, there is a formula, I've been told, my town has complained about it, that limits what perpetually affordable housing can be taxed at, and it's below market value. I still haven't gotten the formula, but there is.
Well, that makes sense, because the owners, when they sell, don't get all of their equity, but that doesn't mean the house isn't charged and paid into the education fund. They do. So I only mention that because we all agree that the CUDs, which is the vehicle you've all selected, is moving us towards something we all want, which is universal access. But that doesn't mean that their business model shouldn't include all the inputs and requirements that everybody else has, in my view. But that's a policy choice for you guys. Also, the difference in the costs per mile that I mentioned before, the 2, 7, and 13, no doubt it has something to do with the fact that obviously you have to go a lot farther to reach a house in a seriously rural area than you do in Chittenden County. Nevertheless, we have a lot of low-income people in Chittenden County, and they will be required to pay, in effect, indirectly, this elevated cost that is charged in Chittenden County. So the equity issue works both ways. And one final thing, which is kind of fun, and forgive me, but in reading the bill, there was a provision related to another issue, which you guys will be talking about, that reminded me of a job we did several years back about ski area leases of public land. And I learned at that time, it was around that time, that the state chose, some of you were around at that time, to exempt ski areas from taxation for machinery and equipment and snowmaking and so forth. And it struck me because here you are saying, in effect, communications related infrastructure or machinery and equipment and so forth will be subject to tax, but not the ski areas. So I never miss an opportunity to talk about this because it drove me crazy. If you want to reconsider the exemption and the favor you've done for the ski areas, this would be a great time.
Jane doesn't want anyone else to hate her. Okay,
Fiber going up the lift poles.
fiber going up to the poles. Okay. Thank you. That's been helpful. I think we're still trying to get into the minutia of this. So any questions for Auditor Hoffer?
By the way, I don't know whether this has been presented to you or will be, but I happened to see a document today presented, I think, to a House committee, maybe Ways and Means, from VCUTA, which referred to another element of the bill, which is the poll fee. And the example provided in the VCUTA document was, I think, Maple, which I guess is Addison County, I think. And based on the number of polls that CUD owned, they claim to own, I don't know what the source of the data, they said it would increase their costs by about $31,000, which they claimed was 14% of their operating costs, which seemed inconceivable to me. So if you come across that document and you get an answer to the question, how can that be? Somebody please let me know.
Okay, we'll try and chase down that document. Because we will definitely have them in. Okay, any questions? Okay, not, thank you. Mr. Witt, you're up. We are losing the committee at 4. That's my time frame here today.
There was some delays in drafting of what I wanted to talk about. So I don't know, it might be more informative. I thank you for the offer, but if there's people, I believe Representative Sims wants to present the bill.
Yeah.
She's sponsored, so I think having
Okay.
more of the foundation on the lines would be useful.
Okay, thank you. Representative Sims?
Do you want to go in that order?
Uh,
think good.
That's you next
First,
on my agenda. Whitaker's passing for today.
I'm sure I have to go.
Oh, that's right. I'm losing 2 of you at 3 and 3 of you at 4. So we are going to adjourn by. Okay, welcome.
Madam Chair, Committee, Representative Catherine Sims, Ways and Means from Grassberry. Appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about 657, the telecom bill, and share a little bit about the context for the bill and why we landed where we did, and happy to answer any questions. So I think overall, our goal here is to modernize telecommunications taxes and fees to be more competitively neutral and help stabilize some of the revenue sources to support the public benefits related to telecommunications network. And so there are kind of 3 buckets to the bill. There's the Universal Service Fund, the Telephone Personal Property Tax, state right-of-way fee, and each of those are responding to different problems. So you all are well aware of the declining revenue going to the Universal Service Fund, which we've been backfilling with general fund dollars. And so bucket 1 is trying to stabilize revenue for the Universal Service Fund by moving to the per line fee. The second bucket is responding to declining revenue in the Telephone Personal Property Tax, and that it's assessed on kind of outdated technology that's no longer competitively neutral. There's a horizontal equity challenge there since it was put in place in 1947, and how we get data and voice has changed dramatically since then. So that's the telephone personal property kind of problem that we're trying to solve. And then lastly, AOT being out of compliance with the statute to execute lease agreements with broadband and wireless providers who use the state right-of-way fee. I think I'll skip the Universal Service Fund piece because it seems like you guys are kind
everybody's got
of level set on that one. And so I'll focus a little bit more on the telephone personal property tax piece and the state right-of-way piece. So our goal with the telephone personal property tax, again, is modernization. It's actually not about raising revenue and instead responding to the 2021 Vermont Tax Structure Commission report that recommended repealing the telephone personal property tax because of the declining revenue and the somewhat outdated technology serving as the base. So right now, the telephone personal property tax only applies to telephone companies. And that's been on the books since 1947 and is assessed at 2.37% of the net book value. So the net book value declines over time, and it's only on telephone. I think we all know we get information in really different ways than we did in 1947. I got a bunch of different wires coming into my house now. And, you know, as the communications marketplace changes, we end up with disparate tax treatment, you know, creating horizontal equity issues, where, you know, two companies might purchase and deploy the same kind of router or switch, but they might be taxed differently depending on whether or not they're a telephone company. And so that's one piece of the modernization. And the other is, I think, as you all have discussed, some towns assess business personal property. But that's only 42 towns that currently tax machinery and equipment, and 8 towns that tax inventory. So that's only 1/5 of the towns that treat business that assess a tax on business personal property tax. So there's inconsistent treatment from town to town. And, you know, looking at a paper from NCLS, you know, many, in fact, it seems like most other states have a central assessment for communications infrastructure, recognizing how specialized it is. And they tax both real property and, in fact, personal property for telecommunications businesses. So many other states have telecommunications assets taxed as real property and also business personal property. But what this bill does, trying to modernize, is it defines communications property, wires, cable, conduit, poles, wireless towers, network equipment, sets that all on the grand list as real estate. It applies to voice, broadband, and cable. So we're more consistently treating all of our companies that provide telecommunications services. And then it requires those providers to submit an inventory PVR, and then PVR has a model to, you know, consistently assess the value of that, which is then provided to listers, so that we're not additionally burdening our local listers with valuing these, you know, assets that require more specialized expertise. And this approach is modeled after how we currently treat electric facilities. And you all know we're updating that, or you all, I assume, I think have passed that miscellaneous tax, and, you know, continue to build the expertise at a statewide level, so we have consistency across the grand list, and we're not burdening the local listers with having to do this work. And the bill, you know, adds kind of belts and suspenders, clarifying that as we make the shift, the telecommunications infrastructure being on the grand list, that we're not taxing communications property as business personal property. So we're avoiding that double taxation. And our goal here is like consistency across the technologies and across towns.
Okay, we had a request from property valuation, because we were concerned about once you get into machinery and splitters and switching, that both the local listers and property valuation would not have that skill. They asked us to wireless towers because they felt that's what they are capable of doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the definition of communications property is a policy decision. I think, you know, we included in the bill an appropriation for PVR to stand up a model to do this work. We've heard from them that they're gonna need to hire expertise to develop that model. But the companies are providing that information, they put it into the model, and then that information gets shared in a consistent way with all the listers to do that work.
Okay, this
but,
should,
You know, that definition
mesh.
is the policy choice.
that should mesh with the miscellaneous tax bill you sent us, which had BBR doing all the poles and wires. Now we're giving them more things, towers, what else is in here? Poles, antennas, conduits, wires, cables,
Yeah, I think we're saying
But
that
I think
critical
that
telecommunications
the same-
infrastructure.
area of expertise.
Yeah, so we're saying the things that you need to operate this telecommunications business, it's all a part of that network, has a value, and that value should be assessed centrally with expertise and then lodged into the grand list as real property, consistent with how.
Listers. Did you get from the listers?
So I think again,
No, we with the miscellaneous tax bill, we had several irate listers about usurping their power and their grand list. I'm assuming since we're usurping more, we might get, there's just a PR kind of, we should have been included in this discussion feeling, so.
I think what's different here and distinguishes it from the electric facility changes that we've made, local listers have been assessing them. And I can understand that they might have some concerns that the PVR valuation might be different than their current assessments. But in this case, these telecommunications assets have not been on the grant list. And so this is a change to add this as a new asset onto the grant list. And I think we're being sensitive to not require additional work that may require additional expertise that listers may have. And these our understanding is how they would welcome additional items on their grant list. And it's not having to do the work to accrue that additional revenue. So that's the kind of telephone personal property tax side, consistently treat all telecom providers, consistent across all towns. As you, and then shifting to the state right of way, as you heard from the auditor, you know, this was something that was flagged by him. There has been on statute this requirement to assess a reasonable charge for the use of state right of way, you know, recognizing that these are for-profit private companies getting a benefit from the use of state land, and that fee is a part of kind of doing cost of business. In our work, we try to respond to some of the questions or concerns that were raised that seem to have contributed to this being on the books for 17 years, but not implemented. We heard VTrans say they don't know where stuff is. And so we added language to require companies to provide that inventory, like we do for electric, you know, we were just discussing with the telephone personal property tax companies providing that inventory. So from my sense, I think it would be pretty straightforward if all the companies are providing the information about the miles or the feet that they have on the state right of way for VTrans to assess that fee. So I guess I'm a little confused why they think it would be incredibly expensive to assess this if the companies are providing all the information that they need. Consistent with our effort to modernize across technology, we use a kind of consistent definition of telecommunications providers that would be subject to this right-of-way charge. And to respond to some of the things that the auditor just mentioned, recognizing the different costs to build out to different customer bases, that in our low density region, the rate of return is going to be the same for the provider, and wanting to balance recognizing that these are, you know, companies using state land for private or for benefit, but also wanting to help build broadband out to underserved areas. And so the fee structure that we propose tried to recognize the different rate of return one might see in a more populous or less populous region. And we also aligned the exemptions for eligible applicants based on folks who can apply for broadband grants. So already the state has sort of said, these are the folks that are eligible to apply to build out underserved areas. And we use that same list for the exemptions to the right-of-way fee, acknowledging that they're doing the hard work of building in the high-cost areas, that these entities have a public mission, and CUDs in particular are municipal entities, which don't typically, pay taxes. But ultimately, that's a policy choice about whether
CUDs own very few poles. They usually hang on other utility poles, or at least
Yeah, so
they're putting in more now, but generally they're hanging on other utility poles.
So the state right of way
And this
fee is based on per foot of line, so it has nothing to do with poles.
This is an annual fee.
So this is an annual lease agreement. Wireless providers we propose a flat rate for wireless providers who attach to poles, and then it is a per foot annual fee for miles of wire.
And how did you arrive at that fee?
So for the amount, we worked with JFO to look at other states, and we wanted to kind of be in the middle range for that. And
So
we
other
added
states
this.
do this?
there were other models that we looked at from other states.
Okay,
Yeah, and then we added I think we took the fee amounts from one state and the kind of county level bands from another. And again, it's a policy choice about whether there are exemptions or not. We did include in the bill that the secretary is authorized to propose standards and procedures for waiving fees. So, we're trying to help set in motion what was set in motion 17 years ago and further clarify how to do it. And again, create opportunity for the secretary to come back and propose recommendations for additional waivers. I would also note that V-Trans does currently charge utilities for the use of the right of way. So they are able to assess right of way fees in other cases. I think you heard from Rob White that the state does charge for cell phone providers to attach to state buildings. The Agency of Natural Resources charges fees for electronic communication sites located on state land. So there are other areas of government that have, obligations to assess fees and are able to move forward with that. And
the poles are one thing,
so this is not poles.
no, but feet of wire might be more difficult to assess.
Yeah, I think again, this is on the books, and these are for-profit private companies using public land for benefits, and it seems reasonable to charge a fair and reasonable fee for the use of that. And I am additionally kind of concerned when we hear that we don't know what is where on state land. I think at a minimum, I would like to know what is on state land. I think it's also reasonable to charge a fair fee for the use of that. I hope the companies that have that wire know where it is and that it is not overly burdensome to ask them what they own that is on state right of way.
Representative Sims, it's, I think, got to where you have to start, which we have different entities charging fees and on what we don't know is out there. And we have things like definitions of what wires are. I don't know, like the fence for my cows, that's a wire.
That's a wire.
Yeah, if it was a, if it was fiber.
We never thought about it.
But there is a definition about the type of wire, so this would be
And a wire, if it's a telegraph wire, I don't know how many different people can be sending each other dots and dashes on a wire for telegraph. You've got dozens of people on fiber that are sending the similar communications a whole bunch of times. So there's whoever decides what the values are can't decide until you know what functions they do and where the stuff is.
So just as a reminder, is it helpful, the fee structure sets up a reasonable charge, a flat amount for a small wireless facility, and then the per linear foot fee is for twisted pair cable, coax cable, and fiber optic cable. So we would not be looking at your electric wire to get your cows in. We're clear that this is telecommunications lines.
But there's always next year.
Yeah. I mean, you planted the seed. I'm gonna think about that. And again, we did try to be responsive to feedback from V-Trans and the companies about the time it might take for them to gather the inventory. So I believe we pushed it out beyond a year to submit that inventory, and then additional time for V-Trans to receive that inventory and move towards actually assessing that fee. So we're gathering the info and then building a model. Well, we are obligating the telecommunications providers to provide an inventory to V-Trans of how much footage, how much telecommunications infrastructure they have on the state right of way. And then V-Trans has time to turn that around and assess the fee as we.
And if they're not interested in telling us?
a remote their license?
I think that's a great question for Ledge Council, we have in the room. Um, they are obligated to, provide that information. I think we could choose what to do if they were non-compliant.
That, I don't know that they have ever said they won't be compliant, an awful lot of it is known. The poles. I think the wires, how many feet of wire is going to be a little more challenging. I know we've got wires that go through swamps and back roads, and that may take a while to determine, because, and you know, just to make ready fees, that there's a lot of things on the next one, on those poles, so we'll work on a reasonable amount of time.
So I think that's all I got for you, other than, you know, we did work with JFO to do a fiscal note, and I don't know if you've heard from them on that, but.
You know.
Yeah, our goal here, modernize. Since how we get information is changing, let's update our definitions, be consistent across types of providers, and, you know, honor what's already in statute.
What's in statute is kind of a jumble of things that don't fit into the definitions that we've talked about. So I don't know how you honor that.
I mean, the 17-year-old requirement that V-Trans shall assess the
Yes, that has.
a reasonable charge for the use of state-owned breakaways for broadband rights to that.
So we will into that. I know we've had V-Trans in. We've
So
had the communications companies in. I'm a little concerned at some point about exempting CUDs. We know that we have nonprofits that pay their staff very well. I don't think CUDs have been there. They're not there yet, but they could be. And if they're doing the same thing, I'm sure.
Could you, on that point, could you elaborate your rationale? I thought I heard you say that CUD's cable providers are all grant eligible, and so that's why you.
Yeah, so, you know, we have made, I think, a commitment to build out broadband to underserved areas, and the CDs in particular are committed to serving every last mile. And, you know, recognizing that that's a more challenging business case, and we align with the folks who are eligible to apply for a broadband grant. So in statute now, CUDs, small telephone companies, and then there are private providers who may partner with the CUD to build out, of course, the universal service plan. So our exemptions are modeled after that list of eligible entities to apply for broadband grants, recognizing that, you know, those are kind of mission-driven organizations that are taking on the expensive, challenging work of building the last mile. So, you know, trying to align with our policy goals around broadband and not have, you know, this fee be additional burden for those who are already doing the hard work. But that's a policy choice. And then the cable companies, again, maybe Ledge Council would be the best to speak to this, but understand that I believe there's a maximum amount that we can charge that 5% franchise fee.
Right, there's federal law.
Which is federal law.
Yeah. Do you,
And the other federal law that just want to make sure to mention is that the state right of way fees have to be used in the transportation
and
fund.
this says that you exempt, the auditor said you exempted Comcast. Is Comcast picked up under operating a transportation company in the state? That would be, I think, a digital. How do you?
So the Comcast, I believe, is the cable company and
Yeah.
in alignment with they're already paying their 5%
5% fee.
franchise
Okay,
fee.
so this would
So we
make
can't
everybody
add
else
on
5%. All right.
So they're already
Yeah.
exempt as required by
Yes.
mandate.
So would anybody else like Consolidated or,
Well, those aren't cable companies.
that's right, there's. So, but any other.
I just want to say, I'm glad we tackled this, because that letter from the auditor from May of 2022 said that we're out of conformance with what was in the statute. So this is addressing that ambiguity that wasn't being addressed. I've also heard in the discussions around this that since we're gonna raise $500,000, it's gonna cost about $500,000, which I heard you question whether or not that's actually true or not. The other thing we could do is just revise the language and just get in conformance with what we're currently doing. Did your committee consider just sort of neutralizing this, changing the language and not collecting the fees, but just getting in sync with how we're currently in practice?
I think being in sync with current practice would be repeal, I think. Because we're not doing anything now, I think, you know, we talked about both options, and I think frankly, either repeal or doing something would be preferable to what we have, which is having something on statute and not doing it. I guess I have a little, JFO was unable for their note to estimate how much revenue this would generate because we don't know. Again, I find that alarming that we don't know how much for-profit private company infrastructure is on state land. We would know more if we move forward with asking for an inventory, and then, you know, we could at a future date make the determination that the juice isn't worth the squeeze, but you know, we have thousands of miles of right of way. We have probably one or more lines along those right of ways. I have trouble imagining it would cost $500,000 to assess a fee if you get the number of feet that a company has. I think it's probably pretty simple to create a bill and send it out. And we tried to make it as easy as possible for VPNs. We did respond to their request for additional staff to set up this model and execute the lease agreement, but we would be able to know how much revenue this would or wouldn't generate. If we had this information provided by.
Something you said just reminded me, because we had several organizations testify, well, the PUC knows, you know, Green Mountain Power knows. I think the individual utilities know that they have poles and where they are in general. There may be one off in a swamp somewhere, they're not so sure. What's they don't know is how many of those poles are in public right of way. I don't know that we have an up-to-date map of the public right of way. So, yeah, they may be along a road, but public right of way is so many feet from the center of the road. Are they in the right of way, or are they 6 inches and 2 inches the other side? That's where it's gonna get, I think, difficult for it, because you're gonna have to measure and hope you get the right center of the road. I'm not sure how far the city of Montpelier owns into my front yard. I know they own quite a few feet. That comes up when you're setting clocks and whose property is it?
Yeah, and I mean, again, here we're focused on
Yeah,
telecommunications
but I
providers
think
and
that-
no wires.
that
It seems
makes-
like important housekeeping to
Yeah.
know where our.
Well, I think they
right of way is
know.
and what's on it.
I think the question is the right of way. It's not simply if it's along a road, it's how many feet from the center of the road. And what do you do if it's half in the right? Because we'll find some of those.
And again, we, you know, specifically authorize the secretary to propose standards and procedures and for waiving fees, so, you know. I think you've heard a number of times they'll get back to you in writing, and we still haven't gotten that, and like, let's
Okay,
take another step
I'm
forward.
gonna take one more question because we've got 2 more witnesses and I'm losing 2 of the remaining members of the committee at 4 o'clock, so you and I, we're gonna thank you.
The discussion has been framed in both an inventory and a modernization thing. And at the same time, we're talking about modernizing, which is kind of undefined. We're using ancient taxation decisions. So we're modernizing some stuff and we're keeping other stuff in antiquity. And it would make sense to find out what stuff is out there and then begin to exercise powers that may have been in place for 37 years on material that was from antiquity, so.
It is
And how?
difficult to ask a company to spend what could be a fair amount of money to tell us where their poles are, so that, or their wires are, so we can tax them on it. There is something counterintuitive about
And then
that.
there's the human, it's.
I would maybe counterbalance that, but they have had extended use of the
Oh,
state
yeah.
land,
Oh, yeah.
without paying.
I think we're unfair.
So they've done a good deal.
Caution us not to mix these things as we carry on conversations and deal with them in the areas that
Yes,
they are.
They are.
Otherwise,
two separate sections of the
two or
bill.
three.
One modernizes telephones in 1947, and the other one does this poles and wires, which has been on the books.
And
Was the
maybe just to
original-
answer the question a little bit more, for me, modernization is also about recognizing that our communications marketplace has changed, and that there was a time when it was just telephone that delivered everything, but now we have cable, fiber, broadband, wireless, and telephone. And I think we want to treat those companies consistently for their use of the state right of way, or in how we tax them. So modernizing to recognize the diversity of communications providers and technologies in our.
Under present law, is it poles? Because I've always heard poles, or is it a fee on wires?
The state right of way is assessing a reasonable charge for the use of state owned right of way.
Okay, so it doesn't specify poles or wires.
I think often you hear utility companies
Right.
charge a pole attachment fee to companies that use it, but that's not state tax
Right,
fee,
yeah.
that's a business to business relationship.
Okay. Go.
The last thing I'll say is, Chittenden County, as much as there is, it's the only one that qualifies for that higher rate, we do have very rural parts, Bolton, Westford, Charlotte. So I'm just worried that this might discourage that rate structure for expansion to those areas. So I would love more flexible language where it might even be more factored along how many people are serviced or the population density along those right of ways. So that's something where I might come up with some alternative.
It's all a policy choice, and I think we were trying to balance like simplicity and, nuance, and would love to hear ideas that you have about how to do it better.
Thank you. Okay,
Just,
Senator Brandon,
and it's just one thing.
yeah,
How did we go this long? Just looking the other way, was it?
It makes me wonder what else we're not doing, doesn't it? You start getting really nervous, but thank you to the auditor for flagging this and bringing it to our attention.
can you turn the lights on? So we can see the witness there.
Thank you.
The sun has gone in. Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. This has been helpful. Okay, Bernstein is here. Okay. All right, introduce yourself for the record and then the floor is yours. All right, I'm Senate Finance.
Thank you. I'm Mimi Bernstein. I'm a lister and assessor for the town of Randolph. I'm a committee member. I'm on a legislative committee for VALA. And I hold the Vermont Property Master Assessor Level 4 designation from PBR. And I'm here today speaking for VALA. We have some of the legislative committee. We have some questions and concerns about this bill. And one is, it's unclear if this is affecting both the municipal and the education grants, or just the education grants. It doesn't say.
Okay, I thought it was both.
Okay, so if so, I want to get a fair share. If any of this comes through my town, then I definitely want my town to get their fair share as well. But my town voted in like 1982 to be finalized in 1985, not to assess first business personal property, but we do assess cable personal property.
And this would now be listed as real personal property, so it would be on your grand list. As
That's where
they.
Yeah, that's where it's confusing because in section 7, I have the thing 713. It just wasn't clear to us. It requires all communication property, tangible personal property to be set in the grand list as real estate and taxed at appraisal value. Applies to telecommunications, broadband, and cable television facilities. This is section 7 through 13. But then it says specific communication property is not business personal property and therefore not subject to a local option exemption. And clarifies that communications property owned by municipality is taxed only if it's located outside the municipality's territorial limits. So to us, it's like unclear what is the tangible, what is the properties.
I'm not,
Like, it seems to contradict
yeah, PBR asked us in C, that's page 29 of my bill, to draw a line after wireless towers. So they're not gonna be looking at machinery, distribution hubs, switching equipment, routers. I think when we saw that, we had a concern that listers might not know how to do those as personal property.
no,
And or as real property, and
No.
PBR says they don't either.
yeah, well, so, yeah, part of being a professional and being qualified is to know when you're not qualified
Right.
or something. And business personal property use is a whole other field of assessment, and it requires its own criteria and qualifications. And it's a whole other field, and we're concerned what makes PDNR qualified. Appraisers of personal property.
But in another bill, PBR is going to be hiring lister, appraiser with specialty in the poles and wires section. And we wanted to make sure that this would fall under that expertise. I'm not sure. So now that they've had a chance to go back, we will have PBR back and tell us, because I didn't want to have listers having to do, the switching equipment appraisal.
Yeah, that's part of it is if PBR is going to do it, and we, like you said before, the listers we do and assessors, we do care about our grand list. We're very protective of the grand list. It's the basis for everything that we do, like for how all the money comes in. And if, like right now, I use PBR's values myself in my town because I don't have the qualifications to do such. But in researching the past few years that I've been the assessor, hearing from other towns that hire their own appraiser, they will make millions, but I mean, millions more, like millions on their own grand list, but they spend so much time on appeals and grievances for that. And so if I choose or I have to take PBNR's value
Right.
and they appeal for my town, is the state of Vermont going to pay for that and take
Yes.
over the grievances, or?
We
am
asked that
Yeah,
for the poles and wires. But if it is our appraisal and our appraiser, we were told for the poles and wires that we would be defending it. Which for the towns that are paying thousands of dollars to hire a specialized appraiser, we're hoping this will give them some relief. It will give the utilities, not having 52 different valuations to what is essentially the same pole and wire, just in a different town. So that they'll have uniformity and you won't have to worry about it.
hopefully, will they lodge it, like when they look at my grand list and my 411, it's either value, and they call. Yeah, I want to grade. I just say, call the state.
Yes, the understanding is the
Okay.
state is doing them. I can be corrected, I will check on this,
Yeah,
but
like
that's
that
what
should
we were
be-
told.
That should
with-
be clear
Yes, it should
in
be.
this legislation who, if the towns don't get to choose how it's done, it needs to be clear that when they appeal to a town, because they can appeal to like 10 towns at once,
Oh, yeah.
you know, that that the state handles that. And then how does that affect my lodging of my grand list? Because
Yes.
some appeals go for years and I'm not gonna have an official lodging
Right.
of my grand list for years.
And they probably won't appeal the towns, they will probably appeal the state's appraisal.
Yeah.
Because I don't think there's gonna be huge variation for town in any.
There's one piece in which I think we do need more clarity from PBR, and that is, I would think that there may be a likelihood that the value of a pole in town A may in fact be different than the value of a pole in town B. We talked about consistency as one of the issues, but I don't think that there's ought in all probability be likely consistency of the same item in each town, because it's placement as well, there may be other factors
They have a
involved.
lot
I
of
don't know what those are, but I think in talking with PBR, I think it's something that we should ask and try to
We'll
understand.
have PBR back because as they said, the poles are, at least the poles deteriorate. So they have lesser value, you get a pileated woodpecker on one and you've got a problem. And it may depend on, some may just have phone lines and electric lines and others may have 10 cable lines on it. That might be a difference, but I don't know if they're just hiring an appraiser for, work thing, or if this is a full-time position, so we'll ask. How they're gonna appraise it, and we will make sure that we get in here that the state will defend its appraisal values. Cause it's not gonna value the town, that they have to defend our values. Okay,
On that, if they're gonna hire one appraiser, is one enough? I mean, PBR is already, between last year and this year, there's so much on their plate,
yeah,
like it gets piled on. So me as an assessor, I would worry if
okay.
one person is enough. And, if
It
anyone's
is.
looked at how much through this process has
Yeah.
been dealt to them.
I think there's probably more consistency in poles and wires than there are in residential real estate, which does require you to go into.
It does, yeah, yeah.
I've done some appeals, I have great sympathy for that.
Right, and so when we, to PBR, or whoever is gonna be now sending us inventory lists and values. There's gonna be a great workload at the beginning to set up spans for new inventory. Figuring out how to set it up in this, we have different CAMA programs, the computer mass appraisal systems. We have the NIMRIC grand list, which is where the 411 and the tax bills and everything comes from. We have VT and, whatever taxing system you have. So there's gonna be that set up and those people
Get it,
and a town not using state software for taxes will have more adjustments to do to their own taxing software. So there's more departments and more workload that's going to be taken on as it's put on our grand list. And, I feel like the BT Pi rollout, but we're still working on it, like how many years later.
we think you might be gonna get more money, so that might be helpful.
Yeah, and we just didn't see that as part of when we read
No,
this.
that's the first time that issue's come up.
Yeah, cause I'm grateful that you guys have invited an actual, like illustrator and assessor who's going to implement this.
I tried to talk to
Yeah.
people that are gonna do the work.
Yeah, cause there's more process, like burdening the listers. Who's gonna be responsible for checking on like the sites? Who, is it the lister that has to go out? And see if these things still exist, or is it gonna be someone from the state because the state's filing the
I
agreement?
think we're supposed to be doing the appraisal of the poles and wires, which I assume if there's any question, we're gonna have to go out and assess if the pole is there, if it's full of woodpecker holes or mold, and you know,
Yeah.
how many wires are hanging on it. There'll be some, heavy work up front.
Yeah, I know that, so I wasn't here in the eighties. I know my father-in-law, my husband were. And the stories I tell about business, I've heard about business personal property and why town stop it. Is because, you know, March 31st, there's big lines
We
to borders.
heard that.
Yeah, and April 2nd,
Stores.
everybody's moving back in.
Inventory,
Yeah,
for hours.
yeah,
Is your
yeah.
father-in-law Richard?
That's my father,
It's your father.
my father-in-law.
Father.
Yeah, yeah. That's not gonna be helpful.
I love it.
Okay.
It's so long because
He's
Yeah.
he's a feisty guy. I like that.
He's my senior.
I agree.
But right now, I wanna also state, there's no current training available at PNR to explain personal property. Like if I have to take someone's word for it, I wanna be trained to look out for what I need to look out for.
okay,
Right, like I do that with the pilot program. You know, my responsibility for the grand list is because someone says it's so. I need to verify that it's so, and so I need that training. As well as PBR. And I think. That is all I have on my list.
okay, thank you. That is very helpful. And we will get PBR back and get this straightened out. Okay, any questions from the committee? Okay, thank you. And we have Scott Phillips. Nice.
Good, then at the end here between you and a nice day.
Between the natural resources.
Yeah, not it.
Yeah.
But, so the floor is yours.
Thank you.
Introduce yourself for the record.
Senator Cummings, Vice Chair, and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to testify today regarding H 657. My name is Scott Brooks, and I'm the Director of Government Affairs at Consolidated Communications. Testifying today specifically in opposition of Section 13A, the state-owned right-of-way provision proposed legislation as written. As you know, the communication sector is highly competitive, and it has changed over the last 17 years for sure. And the demand for critical high-speed broadband is ever growing, especially in the rural parts of the state. The pandemic exposed the need for universal broadband, and Consolidated Communications has been a leader, expanding our future-proof fiber network throughout the state. We've been deploying and upgrading our infrastructure with a predictable regulatory and tax framework, so we have continued to invest in our own capital. However, to build fiber deeper into rural communities, we also partnered with the Communications Union Districts, the CUDs. The first to partner with Consolidated was the Southern Vermont CUD, and the partnership allowed the Southern Vermont CUD to be one of the first to offer high-speed universal broadband service in their district, which was completed in 2023. So kudos to them. Our commitment to the state and residents continues. We have since partnered with two CUDs, Lamoille and Otter Creek. And those bills are set to start in Q2 and Q3 of this year respectively. Consolidated Communications is committed to continue to try and find ways to deploy and build high-speed fiber. But as stated above, this is all predicated on a predictable regulatory and tax framework that incentivizes us to continue to invest in Vermont. Since 2021, Consolidated has invested $86 million in fiber deployment in both hardware and fiber, and has built 2,500 miles of fiber in the state. And the hope is that the proposed legislation is on slow deployment and put future growth at risk. So with that as the backdrop, we understand the important role of government plays to ensure the safety, consistency, and competitive neutrality, which we've talked about already today, with respect to the state, the access to state right away. There are two main issues which we have with Section 13A, and that is the data collection and the exemptions that are currently in place. Regarding the first section, we have no problem changing from percentage to a per line. We have no issues with that at all. The telephone personal property tax, we're not adamantly opposed. We don't feel it's the best. This is what I believe New Hampshire does, and has done for the last 10 years. And there's been a lot of litigation with towns and the state and other entities. So I think they speak before talking about that litigation. We're not for that. So just as an FYI. First, the manner in which Section 13 directs this data collection is not necessarily burdensome. Consolidated is an attacher to most polls in Vermont now.
We do not pull licenses or permits when they need to be attached, and we go through the attachment application process with the pole owner, which is the electric utilities for the most part. For areas where we do own poles, we obtain permits, licenses for the poles, but in no system do we indicate that our cables in the state right away is in the state right away, the town right away, or private property. Our plant records, which is called GTEC, is not GIS spatially accurate, it's only approximate, which is what we talked about a little earlier. Madam Chair, you had talked about that a little bit. So this means that if you overlay the records, if we get a mapping from the state that they identify, and we overlay with polygons on their mapping system, we don't know if they're in the state right away, public right away, or town right away, or private property.
Okay.
So that's the issue so far. Thus, those sections and corridors will likely have to be looked at manually and adjusted to try and true up records. And again, we're not necessarily opposed to doing that. We think that's probably the right thing to do. But the timeline for us, because we have cable in 90% of the state, is burdensome. We probably have to hire contractors to go through the state and get some eyes on the cables.
Yeah.
So that's the issue. And again, long term, if we have our own engineers, it's obviously more economically feasible for us, but it would take longer. But in the condensed time frame, what I think January 1st of 2025, we have to have this, I
You can always
believe.
adjust that.
So just that's why I wanted to make you aware. So appreciate that. The second is the competitive fairness with respect to all the entities that were given an exemption. At face value, it appears that only Consolidated is not exempted, which is in a highly competitive marketplace is a major disadvantage. For example, and I'm just gonna use an example. One exception is the small communications providers, eligible communication providers, as they're also known. Some of those companies are roughly the same size as Consolidated. National, they have a national footprint, but yet because they're under 10% in the state, they have a smaller footprint, they are exempted. And yet they're the same size roughly as Consolidated. And then also what is the rationale behind the exemption of cable companies? We talked about that a little bit, and the Cable Act, which is federal, there is a maximum of 5%. But my understanding is that 5% that the cable companies are that they give back to the AMOs is that it's a pass through to their customers. So in reality, the customers are the ones that are actually paying that $6+ million, I think I remember seeing that they're paying to the state. But it's really the customers that are paying the state. So I just want to make sure people understood that. It's not coming out of their pockets, it's not coming out of revenue.
I think we understand pass through.
Oh, yeah, well, no, I didn't know if that people understood that what was actually happening.
Yeah.
Or if they were running a check out of their own, revenue stream.
Right.
Right, other profits, exactly. Let's see, where was I? If there's no exceptions, then if there were no exceptions, then the financial burden would evenly apply and it would not be discriminatory from our perspective. I know affordability is also a concern for consumers, and with these new taxes, we would most likely have to assess our customers on their bills, and providers not have the same, and the other providers not have the same burden. In a time where we're trying to keep the service affordable, we feel that Section 13 has unintended consequences of impacting the less fortunate more than most. So in summary, that's kind of my written testimony, but I'd be happy to take any questions that anybody may have.
Okay. So the problem is, you know where your poles are, just tell us. In actual fact, the mapping isn't accurate enough to tell you if you're in private right of way, if you moved over into private property. In the town right of way, you'd have to go out and measure, I guess, from the center line.
Once, if we have a map from the transportation department, and we overlay what we have, there are going to be, I can tell you right now, a lot of discrepancies.
Yes.
Which means that we need to get folks out there to actually, to see if it is actually the state right away, town right away, or private property.
Okay.
So that's just laborious. It just takes time.
That's a new understanding today as to why it isn't just a simple matter for you to tell us where your poles are. Is that you know approximately where they are, but if that means they're in because the right of way is a matter of feet. So you've got to be fairly accurate to know if you're in there. We don't build it if you're partially in there. So that, I think, is something to consider. Okay.
And the exemptions, we feel that that's not necessarily, adequate either for for what we're trying to do, and we would be charged, and all the other entities,
Right.
there's five entities wouldn't be charged.
Okay, so we've got competitive inequity,
Yeah.
we've got cost and feasibility, at least feasibility and the timeframe we've given. I'm assuming you can't do a whole lot under snow. So, committee, any questions? If there's not one, send them comment.
What are you asking of this committee, that we just strike the language, or that we do something else instead? Because we do have a matter of something on the books that's not being
Yeah.
carried out.
Yeah, I don't think it's a matter of that we need to strike it per se. What we'd like to see is more equity. And the second thing would be, we just need more time. If this is gonna be implemented, we just need more time to get that information, work with the transportation department and get it trued up, so that it's accurate and not just a guess. So, and we could probably meet the mandate by January first, but it would require us to hire contractors, which again is an additional expense because we just have so much facilities in the state.
Yeah.
Compared to the other smaller eligible communications, they have very tiny, they have 1 or 2 towns in some cases, or 3 towns that they.
More time, 6 months more.
Uh,
More.
I could huddle with, we have a senior director that actually oversees this, he lives up in Isle of Mont, Steve Freeman, I could ask him that question if you'd like, and
I mean,
see what he would feel would be reasonable.
some of it is weather dependent.
Well, that's the other
If it
issue
snows
too.
in November,
Yeah.
and if you got a really bad mud season and you need to hike around hip boots and that, some of us go up through woods and swamps, so.
So the other piece of this, just so that you're aware, is that, oftentimes the engineers that would be going out to assist with this are also the engineers right now that are working overtime. We're gonna spend another $44 million this year to roll out more broadband. And those are the engineers that are actually engineering additional fiber to more parts of Vermont, to the consumers, and working with Lamoille. We're working with Lamoille this year in Otter Creek. And I know they have timelines, we have timelines with VCD to get this up to speed sooner than later. So that's the other piece, is that where our engineers are
Okay,
being
so-
pulled back and forth.
All right,
And do we want more fiber, or do we want to rectify, there's something that's been, not that we want to push the can down another 17 years, don't get me wrong, but it's just, it's a balancing act.
okay. And your time frame for your fiber extension is 7 years? Is that what you said, or how long?
No, I being
Okay, I mean, how long?
He doesn't mean.
Oh,
It doesn't need just
17
17 years, right? That
Okay.
this was, I
I was
think, this was in
thinking
place 17
years.
years ago, is my understanding, right? So I'm being somewhat facetious.
Senator Brock.
I mentioned concerns about the exemptions to entities whose actual size is much larger. Is there a language that you would recommend or ask us to consider?
Well, I think it's in statute, small eligible telecommunications provider are in statute. So I don't know if that would, if you could or would even want to change
We're the
that.
legislature, we can do anything.
My big thing is either not exempt them because, they are in the same, they're for-profit company just like we are. Same with the cable providers.
Well, could you say, for example, companies with a gross revenue less than a certain amount for purposes of the Vermont statute are considered small and would be exempt? Make sense?
We could discuss it.
If you have some thoughts.
Okay.
Just send us what your thoughts are as to what you would like to see. It's not that necessarily we do it, but
Yeah.
I think we should consider it.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think that's worth considering. Senator Chip.
I think I've asked this of the cable providers, small communications providers, but I'll ask you, do you know if you currently pay any private or municipalities right-of-way charges? Is the state out of step with, are you paying for when those lines are outside of the state right-of-way? Are you writing checks to individual entities?
Well, we do have, there's times when we have to, get, what's the word I'm looking for here? But if you want to put, lines on their land, we have to get a deed or. Yeah, right away, thank you.
Those one times you pay for that right
Correct,
away,
one
and
time.
it's not like an annual charge
Not
like
annual
we're
charge,
contemplating
right.
here.
Is one.
Yeah, and I'm. Okay,
That's correct.
yeah, all right, there's some counterintuitive things. We're asking them to spend money so we can tax them. What we've said we want is to know where the poles are in our right of way. But what was a one-time fee is now becoming a fee, so.
You mentioned the federal act that translated to the 5% going to the AMOs. Do you know if that, the original rationale for that was tied to the use of right of ways for the cable providers running the lines?
It's been a while, it's been 10 years since I've had to look at that, so I'd have to brush up back on it. I did some cable franchise agreements in New Hampshire about 10 years ago, 10 years ago, and in New Hampshire, it's a little different because towns can opt to do 0% up to 5%. And I think here, correct me, somebody may be able to correct me, but I think here it's 5%. It all has to go towards the AMOs. So it's a little different in the state.
Yeah. Okay. Then,
So I'm trying to understand how you tax on value for this stuff. And
well, that's what we're gonna have the PBR in,
you have the cost
yeah.
of the, whatever you're putting out there per wires, per foot.
Yeah,
Then you have the cost of actually hanging it up there.
yeah.
And it's easier to hang it up going across the hayfield than it is going across Lake Champlain.
We're swamped.
So that's it for swamp, but those are different costs. And then, no one would offer the same price for a fiber hookup between Brookfield and Randolph to sell it as they would between Burlington and Winooski. I mean, the Burlington Winooski would sell for a much higher fair market value. And how do we modernize those differences that we recognize today?
Right.
That are significantly different in value of what is owned? Consolidated, they won't even go places that need it because it's not worth their time.
Well,
It's not worth their cable, it's not worth their installation. And other places, it's cutthroat to who gets to get in there first and make everyone else go through your stuff. How do we prescribe that?
We will.
So that any revenues that are collected reflect those various
We will
values.
have property valuation, ask them to come in. That may mean that we need to talk to their appraiser that they are hiring. I'm not sure if it's full-time or part-time to do the appraisals of the poles and wires. And we're adding several other things, but.
But that
how they
only
do it-
covers the purchase value of the material.
Well,
Doesn't cover the difficulty of having installed it.
right, well,
Nor does it cover
we'll ask.
the
them.
money earned.
Right, we don't know that.
Yeah.
So we will ask.
PBR.
Yeah,
But it is at the fair market value.
right.
That's your question. But in order to come up with fair market value, you're gonna look at, is there revenue generated? Where is it placed? What presumably.
We have to tell them that.
Well,
to do that.
that is the question, because they're gonna come up with a valuation model for this communications property. It's an excellent question. How will you determine the fair market value? What are the factors you look at?
83.
Well, and I'm just saying they might be doing that in order to come up with fair market value without you saying that. They might not. I don't know the answer. I can only think that, but
It's
Thank
tricky,
you.
it's tricky because let's say between Burlington and Winooski, you have a 400 pair copper cable. 15 years ago, that copper cable probably was 3/4 full to full, and today it's probably only 1/4 full. So again, if you're talking about the value of that copper, it may be big, but it's probably less valuable today than it was 15, 20 years ago, because there's not very many customers in it.
For communications purposes, it's less valuable.
Correct.
Copper, on the other hand, is worth more. So how,
It's hard to get down.
if you're gonna modernize, you have to take those three different measures into account.
We are going to get that, how property valuation will be appraising these, okay?
But we have to, they're gonna tell us, or we're gonna tell them.
You know how to do it?
I know that there are three different ways to evaluate.
Why don't we ask them how they're going to do it? Okay, It is a specialized value. Don't two of you need to go next?
Yes.
Which
We do.
The two, the nice one and the trouble.
Just before I go, I'd like to hear from the reporter for the Milford House. If we seem to be leaning towards the idea that this is a good idea, but they might need more time. How do you think you at the House would feel about that?
I think we're most interested in moving forward with something that allows everybody to comply with what's in statute. And so if we need more time to get the inventory, but it allows us to move forward with assessing the fee, I think we'd be fine with that.
Thank you, everybody. We will continue with this. I think tomorrow we're gonna look at 8. Are we looking at?
847,
No, but we should look at 847, the one we got. No, the bill we're looking at, the no prior approval.
Yeah, I don't have anything for that. You mentioned that earlier today.
Well,
Do you want the drafter?
I would like the drafters.
Maybe
I
after
would
the
like-
end live stream.
Okay.